Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of the Ryan family murders. We are off to Canada today. Chaps, grab a drink, let's go. Sin and Tonic! May have made a slight mistake. I have just filmed the unboxing of my gin delivery for my Patreon members, and the snacks are all here. They're all here. I never bring snacks to the shed. I just never do. It's going to be difficult because there was the most delicious popcorn involved in this, and I've had far too much already and I feel a bit sick. I might have to have snack breaks. Anyhow, our story is taking us to Canada. A boat. That's all I can do. A boat. It's a bit like when I do Scottish and I can just do Scotland. Aye. The Ryan family is made up of Mum Susan, Dad William, and then 4 boys: Christopher, Leyland, Brett, and AJ. The family were quite an introverted family. They lived in Scarborough, Toronto, Canada, and they had a detached, nice family home. Seems like they kept themselves to themselves, but they were like nice people. People liked them. Very, introvert. That was with the exception of Brett, who people would describe as the extrovert of the family. Brett ended up enrolling at the University of Toronto, but he would soon drop out. It was not for him, and he wasn't doing very well in his studies. He was kind of surrounded by clever cats in one way or another. His younger brother AJ was very talented, very clever chap, and he ended up going to some sort of like gifted school. So he was very intelligent, very academically intelligent. Then his older brother Leyland, he was musically gifted and also artistic, and he excelled in those areas. And then his older brother, his oldest brother, Chris, he was a Toronto Transit fare collector. Not really sure what that is. Is it like, working on public transport and collecting fares from people? I'm not sure, that might be totally wrong. But anyway, it sounds like he enjoyed quite a simple life. Like I said, they were quite introverted, and that despite maybe not being as academically gifted or musically talented, he was a very happy chap, very content in his life. Brett would watch on as his brothers succeeded and flourished in their own lives. Similarly, he also watched his peers that he had originally gone to university with come out of university and build businesses and have successful careers and start making families. And he was just not in a very good place at this point. He was definitely feeling less than, and like he'd failed to launch. Do you remember that film? What had started as a summer job when he was at uni, which was painting houses, had now become his full-time job, and it wasn't very well paid, and this wasn't where he wanted to be in his life at all. Despite always wearing a smile and also volunteering to work with sick children, and he was also a referee for Little League, so he had a very generous spirit, and he seemed incredibly happy. But despite appearances, he actually slipped into quite a dark depression. And that became even worse when his girlfriend at the time left him. So he was on a downward spiral. At this time as well, he had also built up £60,000 worth of debt. I think, reading between the lines, trying to just keep up. It's ego, isn't it, I think? Like, he had an ego. He was like, this is not where I thought I was going to be in my life. And so he probably, he was spending beyond his means, trying to keep up this appearance of doing better than he was. He wasn't humble about it. And ultimately, dude, like, you dropped out of uni and then you didn't do anything else. Like, this is all choices that you make in your life. It doesn't just happen to you. You have a choice. This is where it gets spicy, and it's like literally right at the beginning of the story. So hold on to your hats, because this one is worth it. Brett came up with a plan to turn things around for himself. He went back to school, I hear you cry. Oh, he trained for a better job. Went on a juice cleanse? No. He decided to rob a bank. On the 20th of October in 2007, he went to, also he chose a bank very close to home. It was like 8 minutes from where he actually lived. CIBC Bank. He rocked up there. And his disguise was just equally as the plan in the first place, bonkers. No ski mask for this dude. No. He had placed bandages all over his face. Yeah. He wore a sling and then he walked with a limp. Basically, like, dressed himself up as a freaking mummy. I mean, it was kind of near Halloween. Maybe that's what he was going for. I don't know, but very odd. And the whole thing is just so weird. The whole thing is just so weird. He goes up to the cashier. Is that what you called him? I'm going to use that word. And gives the cashier a note, like slips a note that says, "Give me £2,000. Oh. I mean, this is 2007. We're not talking about like 1970 or 1960 or not. Do you know what I mean? Like two grand. All of that effort and risk for £2,000. Now, the only thing I can think of, which might be why he might have done his homework, and what do I know? I would be terrible at this. But, is it because there's a limit to how much like a teller or a cashier has at their desk, and he's thinking, I just want to be in and out, so I don't want her to... This is what I think happened, because he gives her the note, it says, give me £2,000 or else, and she says... Well, he ends up walking out with £1,015, I believe. Did I say pounds? Dollars. We're in Canada, Canadian dollars. So he doesn't leave with £2,000, he leaves with one. So I think that might be why, he wanted what she had. So, and he didn't want her to go off anywhere to get more money. Like, is it worth it? I don't know. Obviously. And then, over the next 8 months, he would do this 12 more times in his local area. I find that crazy. Over those 12 banks, he ended up taking, I think, stealing 26 or 28,000. Why didn't I write that down? $26,000 or $28,000. I mean, not bad, but he also changed his disguise, went from a mummy to something else, and he bought himself a beard. Stick-on beard, right? He wore glasses and a hat, like someone at a Guess Who. Because of the new disguise, he was labelled the Bearded Bandit. The Bearded Bandit. What? Just can't believe it's a real story. That popcorn's looking at me. Oh, just made me think of the Sticky Bandits, from Home Alone. The wet bandits, the sticky bandits. Oh dear. I mean, it's, mental. Brett, the bearded bandit, remained at large. The police started staking out the local banks to see, they knew they had the description of this bearded bandit, and they were hoping that they could catch him going into a bank, and that did not happen. They were not lucky with that. Their breakthrough came when they looked at the CCTV that was outside of some of the banks, and they saw the genius get into his own vehicle after robbing the bank and driving off. So they had his number plate, and he used his own vehicle. Well done. Anyway, so they could trace his license plate back to his home address, get his name, they knew who he was, and then they didn't arrest him straight away. They put him under surveillance and they followed him, and it was about 2 weeks later that he then attempted to rob another bank. However, they must have been pretty shite because he was spooked. So he walked into the bank, beard, hat, glasses, sticky bandit. He walked into the bank and then felt something was amiss, and then he walked out. They arrested him there and then anyway, even though he hadn't tried to rob it. What a rascal. He was arrested, and then he spent 7 months in jail waiting for his trial. Because Brett had kept his depression from his friends and his family, they knew that he was going through sort of financial things, but they did not know that he was depressed. And like I say, he was cheery, he was happy. It is quite common, isn't it, with people sometimes when they are depressed, they will put on a front. They don't want people to know. And that is definitely what he did. It seemed really out of character that he had done this. And there were a lot of people, friends and family, that came up in his trial as character witnesses. Is that what I mean? Character, like they gave testimony to say, like, this is not this guy. The narrative was one of pity. Like, there's this young, attractive, I don't know why that matters, but it came up a few times, like young and attractive. I guess it means something. My brain can't, does it matter? Obviously. So this young, attractive, young person with life ahead of them, and they had just made a mistake because of their life circumstances. But it's like, isn't that the case for everybody when they do something? Yeah? But because this was not a criminal, I guess, I don't know. But anyway, it was painted this way. So I think the charge was quite lenient. So he had to serve 5 years, but not including the time he'd already been in prison. And actually, he never did serve that because they did like loads of tests and things, to see, like, is this guy a psychopath? What's going on in here? And it was found that there was nothing wrong. He was depressed and he suffered with depression, but he was not a psychopath. There was no tendency to violence or anything like that. So he was then allowed day release, and that was in 2010, and this allowed him to get a job. Then, shortly after that, he was actually granted full parole. Don't judge. Oh my god. Oh my god. So good. I've got sticky teeth now. Serves me right. Brett did struggle to get back on his feet because he now had to declare himself bankrupt because he still owed 60 grand. And it was difficult to get a job because he now had a criminal history. So when employers found out that he had a criminal history, they were like, no thanks. So he was struggling. His parents helped him out at this time, and he managed to get sort of low paid jobs in retail. So he wasn't earning a lot of money, and this seemed to be a problem for him before, like that ego, where he was expecting himself to be and where he actually was. I think that's difficult for anybody in general, isn't it? I think if you've got an expectation of where you thought maybe that's why people struggle with turning 40, turning 50, 30, all of the big numbers, because it's like, oh, you take stock of where you are a bit, don't you? Maybe. Despite the challenges, he enrolled again at the University of Toronto. Now I'm just conscious that I've got popcorn everywhere. And, he wanted to make a go of it again. And then in 2011, a friend of his set him up with a blind date for a woman called Kirsten. Or is it Kristen, Sophie? Kristen Baxter. She was beautiful. She was a physiotherapist. She was successful. She had a condo on the waterfront. It looks quite fancy, and they fell in love. Now, she did know about his criminal past. She knew all of that. She went into this knowing, what he'd done, and yeah, she was in love with him. Things were looking up for Brett. So he'd met Kristen, they'd fallen in love, and then in 2013 he moved in with her, and they lived a really wonderful life for a bit. So they travelled, they went on quite a lot of holidays together, and they ate out. They lived in a really good place for somebody like Brett because he was an extrovert. He liked going out, and he'd met the right person. They seemed to be really living the life and being very happy. It wouldn't be a Sin and Tonic story if, that was the end. Happily ever after. No. So the spiral down again begins now. A year later, so after a year of this lovely life, really tragically, his dad would pass away, William, he died. Brett would be more involved with his mother after this, helping her out more, being more available for her because, her husband has just died. And again, he seemed to become frustrated with where he was at, this low paid job and studying at university. This seemed to be such an issue for him. And then he proposed to Kristen with quite an expensive ring. And it almost feels like at that point, everything just fell apart again. So he proposed to Kristen. She says yes. And then he leaves university. But he doesn't tell her. In fact, I don't think he tells anybody. And then there is this glimmer of hope because he finds himself a job, and it's quite a good job with a tech company. And it's a nice, chunky, healthy salary. And it is something that brings him alive. He's like, yes, this is it. This is where I want to be. And I mean, at this point, it's like, well, good on him. He knew that he wanted something different. Maybe he just knew that university wasn't the thing for him, and he has found this job and they've offered him this job and this is what he actually wants. So he did go out and get it. He would celebrate with his family and Kristen. They had a big meal. It was like joyful, very, very happy time. And then the company found out about his past convictions and they retracted the offer of the job. Ouch. Brett told nobody. This is a common theme for Brett. He doesn't tell the truth and he hides these things. And I just truly believe that this is his egotisticalness, because he doesn't want to admit that something has gone wrong or that he's failed, when really, like, these things do happen. So he's just got this big part of him that can't show that he's failed or that he's not reaching expectation, or either that his mother is putting on him or himself. So he lies about these things that happen. He tells Kristen that he's working from home, that he's got this job with this firm, but that they don't need him to go into an office and that he works from home. She believes him. But he also has to pretend that he's got this income, like this income that he doesn't actually have. So wedding planning must have been an absolute joy for him. Can you imagine just the hot under the collar? What was he doing? Like, did he get into more debt? I'm not sure, but that must have been quite stressful. Also, when he bagged this job, Kristen was like, sweet, we can move out of the condo. I know it's like fancy and whatever, but it's quite small. She's like, we can move out of this small little place and we can get a house. And then they start looking at houses and this whole thing is just snowballing out of control. Brett, he comes clean to his mum. He tells her the truth. This is a big step, I think. He tells her the truth. And he asks her for money. He's like, can you help me out, please? Because he has this lifestyle now to keep up. So he wants her to bail him out, basically. But he also doesn't want her to tell the truth. And he promises her that he will get another job. He's like, I promise you, I will find another job. It will all be okay, but just tide me over. Like, I don't want Kristen to know, she'll leave me. So, can you just help me out? She gives him an ultimatum. She said it's not healthy what you're doing. You have to share this with your future wife. You cannot keep this a secret. You have to tell her the truth. So if you tell her the truth, I will give you the money that you need. Kind of, that's like not the point, because, he wants the money so he can lie to his fiancée and, like, oh yeah, look at all this money that's coming in. A liar. And his mum's like, no. So that was her ultimatum. You tell her the truth and you get the money, or I tell her the truth. Well, that just pisses him right off. He's like, no, strop on, absolute strop on. Instead of listening to the very wise words of his mother and coming clean to his future wife, he goes from 0 to like outer space. He flies over any logical choice in between, like doing nothing, and then what he does. It's beyond. Come clean or fly off the handle and act in desperation and complete cowardliness. Tig. He went out and bought himself a frickin' crossbow. Now, he can't own a gun, he can't buy a gun because of his previous conviction. That's the rules there. So there's no guns for you, sir. But you can buy a crossbow. He buys the crossbow in a second-hand shop. He pays for it with cash. Already premeditation. At this time, he is working at his mum's house, so he's doing odd jobs for her all the time for extra money. She must have been like, why are you not at your tech job? Why are you here? Oh, I don't know. He lied. Anyway, she knows the truth now, but he's currently spending a lot of time at her house because him and his brothers, they are renovating their mum's kitchen. So they're all doing it together. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Family affair. He goes to her house and he takes this crossbow and he hides it in the garage. I mean, it's not being used as a garage. It's basically like a dump site for the time being. And that is where he places the crossbow. On the morning of the 25th of August in 2016, Brett gets up. He pretends that he is getting ready for his day at work at home. And Kristin leaves for her job as a physiotherapist. And then he heads over to his mother's house. He gets there for about 10 o'clock in the morning and he approaches his mum. He wants to talk to her again about this and he's like, please, he begs her, please don't tell Kristin the truth. And this does not end well. She doesn't back down. She's not, listening to what he has to say. And she's like, no, you need to tell her the truth. And things start to turn a bit nasty. So she rings Chris, which is her eldest son. She rings him and she wants him to come over. Brett realises at this point that he is not going to be able to reason with his mother and he is not going to get his own way. So he storms out of the house and he heads to the garage. His mum, Susan, she's right behind him. She is there. She's following him. She's not done. They need to, resolve this. Brett had not preloaded this crossbow, and it takes more than a second to do it. It's not like just picking up a gun or getting a knife. It has to be loaded, and you have to I think it's quite an event. He'd have to be like, can you just stand there? Just wait there while he loads it. No. So instead, he grabs the, I think it's called a bolt. It's not an arrow. I think it's called a crossbow bolt. Nasty looking things. I'll find a picture and share it. And he proceeds to turn and he stabs his mum, his own mum, in the cheek and then the ear. He stabs her in her head. Well, that just turned violent quick, didn't it? After this, he pulls his mum down to the floor and kitchen cabinets are flying all over the place and this flooring that's piled up is all falling on top of them. And this is where he then finds a piece of rope and he strangles his own mum to death. What did I say? 0 to outer space. This guy. Once he's killed his mum, he knows that Chris is on his way, so he loads the crossbow. He loads that now that he's got a bit of time, and then he hides in the garage. When Chris turns up and enters the garage, Brett goes up behind him and he shoots him through the neck. And I believe the bolt goes through his neck and out of his mouth, and it kills him instantly. He then moves their bodies behind this pile of old flooring, and then he puts a tarpaulin over the top. So he's hidden them for now. He was just about to change his clothes and leave when he hears somebody in the house. And then he goes to investigate, and it is his youngest brother, AJ. In the process of going to investigate, he's grabbed another one of these crossbow bolt things. He's taken that with him, and when he realises that AJ has come home and that he has now seen him there, he proceeds to stab AJ in the neck with this crossbow bolt. AJ manages to get out of the house and he gets as far as the driveway, and then he collapses because he's losing a lot of blood. This whole time, Leyland, the other brother, he has been at home asleep. He's been napping. And it's only when Brett has come into the house, because I'm not sure, the argument with his mother didn't wake Leyland, or he just ignored it and was like, oh, for goodness sake. But the commotion between AJ and Brett, that woke him up, and he came out to see what was going on. He then goes outside and finds AJ on the floor, on the driveway, bleeding to death, basically. So he runs back into the house. He doesn't even know Brett's there at this point. He goes to call 999, but before he can get to the phone, hello? Oh, again with leaving my phone on. And the suspense. It was right at that moment. Before he can get to the phone, he is greeted with Brett. The pair of them have a massive fight. It kind of went through the house, so the police could see evidence that this brawl happened, and they had a very big altercation and a big fisticuffs. And I think it was almost like, only one person's going to come out of this alive. Leyland did end up with a massive head wound, and your head, it bleeds a lot, so he was covered in blood. It was just all over him. And also, what's his name? Brett. He was covered in blood too, because he's now covered in the blood of both of his brothers and his mum. This is just, what a grisly affair, really horrible and bloody and ugh. And remarkably, Leyland, he gets free. So even though he's got this awful head wound, he manages to get away from Brett, and he runs and he runs and he runs and he runs for his life. He runs out of the house, he runs past AJ, his brother, who he knows is dying in the driveway. And at this point, AJ has managed to crawl from the drive down to the road front, and he just pegs it. He just runs past his brother and he runs to a neighbour and he hammers on their door, and they answer. Thank God they are in. Brett was following. He was chasing him, but he was quicker. So despite this horrible head injury, he makes it to the neighbour's house and they let him in. He is just beyond traumatised, and he tells them, please ring the police and an ambulance, and which they do. And then he passes out. Brett had initially tried to chase Leyland down, but he realised that he wasn't going to make it. So, and also probably that he was then going to be seen by all of the neighbours if he did so anyway. So he calmly walked back to the house, where he went to the fridge, took out a bottle of water, came back to the front of the house and just sat on the porch and just waited for the police, really. AJ was still alive when the police arrived, but sadly when the paramedics arrived on the scene, he would die shortly afterwards. Brett remained cool as a cucumber, very calm, and he just told the police that there were 2 more bodies in the garage and that he had murdered them. So he was full disclosure. Brett had tried to cover his tracks, most definitely, in the most elaborate, extra way that you will ever hear of. That's what he is, isn't he? He's extra. He's so extra, everything is just extra. Uni dropout, £60,000 in debt, rob a bank. In fact, rob 12. Drop out of uni, second time, lose tech job, tell fiancé, or buy a crossbow and kill my entire family. Extra mental. There are so many choices in between. There are just so many things that would be better than what he did. I can't think of anything worse in each of the situations. So, absolutely bonkers. Brett had begun setting up his alibi before he'd left the house that morning. So Kristen goes off to work, bye, love you, and then he set to work. Now, it's mental. He put his laptop on the table, propped it open, then he set up a fan, like a fan, with plugged into a timer, and he taped a wooden spoon to the fan, bear with me, and then it was all set up so that every so long, before the laptop could close itself down, this fan would come on and the wooden spoon would touch the enter key or the cursor thing, so that it could come, it would play YouTube. Okay? Honestly, isn't that mental enough? And even to think of that, right? So he could say, well, I was on my laptop all day, watching YouTube and working, actually, have a look. Obviously, he planned to get home and take all the fans and everything away. And then on the side, he had this big board with a phone attached to it, his phone, might I add, and then a tablet, his tablet, Sophie, So two fans set up on timers so that at a certain time, this, like, what's it called? You know, like those little things that you use to touch the screen of your phone or your tablet? One of those things. He had two of those set up on a fan so that the timer would come on and the one on his phone would send a text message, right, to someone. So he could say, well, I was at home, my phone was at home, and I sent a message to someone. What? And then the other one on his tablet was to like send an email. Mental. Extra mental. I like that. He then packed a bag with spare clothes and a wig. And then he had to get out of the building because he lived in a condo. He had to get out of the building without being seen by like CCTV, right? He's thinking now. So he goes down the stairwell, not like in the elevator and stuff like that. So he manages to work that out. And then he leaves via the back entrance. But there are cameras in the alley behind the building. So he's only gone and like planned out exactly how he can walk down that alley without being seen by the cameras. And he pulled it off. He did pull it off. And then he gets on a train to near where his mother lives and then walks the 10 minutes to get to her house. So he doesn't take his vehicle this time. He's, remembered that from last time when he got caught. Clearly, Brett had intended on getting away with this, but when his brother escaped out of the house, and then he had tried to chase him, and he realised that he was going to be caught because his brother would say, like, it was Brett, he's got a witness now. So he just sat down and gave himself up. But that wasn't the plan. And then I was almost like, whoa, that alibi just totally went to waste, didn't it? Because, in another universe, he would have got back, he would have gotten away with it, I guess, and then they would be like, oh, how did he do this? Like, even if they thought it was him, he could have got away with it, really could, couldn't he? Nevertheless, the alibi did cause quite a stir, you see, because when the police went to the apartment, condo, what's the difference? Is it just called I don't know. I need to Google that. But when they got there, they went there to make sure that Kristen was okay, because obviously he's just killed, or tried to kill his entire family. Like, come on. So they want to check she's all right. When they get there and they find all of this, they don't know what is going on. I mean, there's fans with spoons taped to them and timers and tablets and laptops and phones. They're thinking bomb. So they call the bomb squad and they evacuate the entire building just to be on the safe side. They didn't realise that it was just a crazy alibi. Brett was charged with 3 counts of murder. His lawyer managed to get sort of a deal put in place. So 2 of the murders were then dropped from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. Now, one of those was the murder of his mother. Well, okay. He said that he didn't plan to kill his mother. Bear with me. He said that he got to her house, he wanted to talk to her, and then they got into this very heated argument, and then the crossbow just happened to be there, and the rest is history. But it wasn't like a planned thing. He then pleaded guilty to first-degree murder for his brother Chris, because he had willingly loaded the crossbow and hidden and then shot him in the neck. So that was the first-degree murder. The other second-degree murder that he pleaded guilty to was the murder of his brother AJ, because he said it was literally not planned whatsoever. He had just not expected him to be home, and he killed him, on the fly. It wasn't meant to happen. It wasn't premeditated. Let's be real. So he went over to talk to his mother, didn't plan on killing her, but had set up this massive elaborate alibi at home. Didn't plan on killing anyone, right? And then bought a crossbow. Didn't plan on killing her though. And I mean, it's mental. He was sentenced to 3 life sentences consecutively, and then another 10 years as well for the attempted murder of Leyland. Don't forget, he tried to kill him too, didn't he? Leyland was left incredibly traumatised, as you can imagine. I mean, this is just something out of a nightmare, horror film, awful. And he watched his brother, his youngest brother, bleed to death. He watched him take his last breaths. It's just awful. It's horrific. Brett showed remorse and regret and said he was sorry for what he had done. The judge said that he was a good man and that he had just been caught up in all of these lies. So a bit like with the first time he was in prison, it's like, oh, yeah, it's been a bit of a shame, isn't it? All of these things that have happened to him. What? Actually, what? People every single day, it's going to make me cross now, do me a favour. No. People get stuck in tricky situations daily in their lives. Every single day it happens to people. People wake up and they're in really crappy, terrible situations in their life, financially, romantically, all sorts of ways. That is life. But people don't go around robbing a bank. Oh, things got really tough. Robbed a bank. What is it with this guy? It's like I don't know. Anyway, people do not just go around murdering their entire families. He's not caught up in lies. These are choices that he made. He made every single choice. This didn't happen to him. He made choices. He left university. He didn't train to get a better job. He didn't try to better himself. He robbed banks. He chose to do that. Really? Like, oh my God, I was just wrapped up in circumstance. Well, I mean, what? Angry me. Enjoy prison. That has made me stress eat popcorn. Anyway, that is all I have for you on today's case. Don't talk your mouth full, Sophie. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Sin and Tonic. I do hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a bag of popcorn. Oh, yes. Maybe I should bring snacks, eh? Not much has been occurring in life. One of the kids broke their glasses, slapped them, snap, like that. What do you do with that? So that was a bit of a, I had to do an emergency trip to the opticians. That's been about as exciting as it gets, really, because we've all had this cold. And it's been a bit of a rubbish one, when you feel really like that. It's the first cold of the winter, of the autumn. So it's always like it comes up on you and you're like, oh, this, man. But there is a part of me that doesn't mind because it slows you down a bit. And you drink loads of tea, which is nice. I love tea. Tea I can't wait. I'm going to go in and have a cuppa. 100%. Yeah. You can treat yourself with snacks that you wouldn't normally, just because you're like under the weather. Yeah. You can be under a blanket. You can cancel plans because you're not well. And you can just be cosy, hot water bottle. I don't mind a cold. It could be a lot worse. There's something homely about it. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, so that's been our little life for a week. Never mind. But it was nice to get my gin box today. That cheered me up. Got my snacks. What have I got my hand on there? Oh, bottle. Oh, we had loads of wind and stuff. Not me personally. Outside, the weather. That was epic. Again, I don't mind that. Quite homey. Like, if you're inside. If you're laying in bed and it's just like... Trampoline. That went somewhere. Rolled over. Yeah, I was surprised we didn't lose the trampoline because it was blowing a hoolie. But yeah, that has been about it. Tell me what you've been up to. Let me live vicariously through what you've done this week. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea because I'm gasping. Desperate. It's all the bloody popcorn. It's all in my teeth as well. It's so freaking nice. It's sticky toffee popcorn. And it actually tastes like sticky toffee pudding. Unbelievable. Thank you so much for joining me. I love you loads. And I will speak to you all in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you next week for, guess what, baby? My 100th video. Yes. Okay. Love you. See you all next week. Bye.